Welcome back. Now for the news in detail. We begin from Mexico, where police have found 9 bodies hanging from a bridge in Mexico City, alongside a drug cartel banner threatening rivals. Police say 10 more bodies have been found hacked up and dumped beside a nearby road. The killing spree was reported in the western state of Michoacan. State Governor Lopez Soler says rival gangs are fighting over territory to control drug activity in the area. In Egypt, security forces have killed 17 suspected militants in 2 separate raids. The Interior Ministry says 8 militants were killed in Fayum province when security forces stormed their hideouts near Cairo. It says a similar raid in a suburb of the capital killed 9 others. The raid came 4 days after a car bombing killed 20 people outside Cairo's main cancer hospital. The ministry says the Hasm militant group was responsible for the bombing. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has arrived in Beijing while tensions with India rise over Kashmir. The visit comes 3 days after India revoked occupied Kashmir special status. During his visit, Qureshi will meet his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. Speaking to the media just before leaving, Qureshi said India wants to disrupt regional peace by revoking Article 370. Qureshi said he will discuss the situation with the Chinese leadership. Earlier, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the scrapping of Article 370 is the beginning of a new era. India stripped occupied Kashmir of its autonomy on Monday, imposing a crushing curfew and communications blackout. Over 500 Kashmiris, including 100 assembly members and 2 former chief ministers, have been arrested. Lack of food and water has compromised life as the lockdown enters its 5th day. Now, Saudi Arabia says it has intercepted a Houthi drone launched from Yemen towards Abbas airport city. Coalition Forces spokesman Colonel Al-Maliki says all attempts by Houthi rebels to launch drones have been neutralized. On local television, a rebel spokesman announced the launch of 2 drone attacks on the kingdom's southern airport. It said the attack targeted the monitoring tower and other sensitive military installations in the city of Abha. Moving on, Iran says the United States naval coalition will cause regional insecurity in the Gulf and the Middle East. Iranian Defense Minister Brigadier General Amir Hatami says Persian Gulf security can be maintained by regional states. Talking to his Kuwaiti, Qatari and Omani counterparts, Hatami proposed a Gulf security dialogue. The Iranian minister says Tehran is providing security in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman. He warned that Israel's inclination to join the U.S. military coalition could cause catastrophe in the Persian Gulf region. Tehran's state media says Qatar and Kuwait are satisfied with Iran's role in providing security for the Gulf. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has accused his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron of sending mixed signals to Iran over possible talks. In a series of tweets, Trump said no one is authorized to speak to Iran on behalf of the United States. According to reports, Macron invited Iranian President Hassan Rouhani to the G7 summit to meet Trump. President Trump has imposed sanctions on Iran and sought to sink an international deal for managing the country's nuclear program. Several major allies, including France, have resisted United States' isolation of Iran. The United Nations says fresh fighting in northwest Syria after the collapse of a brief ceasefire is threatening the lives of millions. It says the risk of civilian casualties has risen, with people returning to their homes during a lull in fighting. United Nations humanitarian chief for Syria, Panos Momtaz, said total panic has eclipsed the region. It said over 500 civilians have been killed and 400,000 displaced since fighting escalated in April. Syrian forces restarted operations after rebels targeted a military post in the region. Moving on, Libya has deported 141 Sudanese migrants as part of a voluntary return program. The repatriation was made from Benghazi's Benina airport and does not include any children. Sudan's Consul General Umar Saleh says the deportation aims to voluntarily return migrants who do not hold legal residency in the country. Libya is one of the main departure points for African migrants who flee poverty and war in a bid to reach Italy by boat. The US and 5 European countries, including the UK, France and Germany, have asked Moscow to withdraw its forces from Georgia. Belgium, Estonia and Poland have also issued a joint statement on the 11th anniversary of the Georgian conflict. The countries are asking Moscow to abide by the EU-mediated ceasefire agreement reached in 2008. The joint statement marked the 11th anniversary of the Georgian conflict with South Ossetia. Georgia's foreign ministry says Moscow is impeding the creation of international security mechanisms. The UN has criticized the latest US sanctions against Venezuela, saying they will intensify the suffering of millions of people. This comes after Washington seized all Venezuelan government assets and banned commercial transactions. The United Nations Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet says the sanctions are extremely broad and will hit the most vulnerable in society. Bachelet says she is extremely concerned the measures will worsen the country's humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, Norway says it is in contact with Venezuela's government and opposition about resuming talks. President Nicolas Maduro has called off this week's round of Oslo-mediated discussions. Brazilian police have arrested a tycoon, Ike Batista, on suspicion of money laundering and capital market manipulation. The mining and oil magnate was once Brazil's richest man. Police and prosecutors say they arrested former billionaire in Rio de Janeiro. Batista has been under house arrest since 2017 on separate charges. Earlier this year, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for paying a $16 million bribe for construction contracts. Batista's lawyer, Fernando Martins, say the new detention is based on events from 2010 and 2013. In recent years, scores of wealthy businessmen and high-profile politicians have been imprisoned for graft in Brazil. Now, Britain has put the entire onus of a no-deal Brexit on the EU, saying its registrants could cost both sides. Britain's foreign minister has pressed the European Union to amend the terms of Britain's withdrawal agreement. In an interview, Raab said the United Kingdom will have to adopt a hard Brexit if the EU does not alter its stance. Raab said a second referendum on Brexit posed the biggest risk to UK. The minister said the Irish backstop was unacceptable.
If the position from the EU is that the withdrawal agreement can't be changed, whether it's add-ons or subtractions, then at full stop, which is their position to date, then let's face it, they will be taking the decision to see the UK leave on no-deal terms, and that's the responsibility that they'll have to bear. We would like a deal, but the backstop, in its certainly in its current form, is undemocratic, and it's something that will have to be removed.
Labour's Jeremy Corbyn has asked the Cabinet Secretary to rule on whether Boris Johnson could force through a no-deal Brexit in a general election period. Now, still in Britain, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the UK will relax its immigration rules for scientists. This is London's bid to attract more top scientists after Brexit by fast-tracking visas. Johnson's office said the fast-track immigration route will attract elite researchers and specialists in science, engineering and technology. Options for the new system include abolishing a cap on number eligible for exceptional talent visas. It may also ensure successful applicants access to the UK labour market. It will remove the requirement of a job offer before arriving in the country.
We are changing the rules on immigration so as to make the UK even more open, even more welcoming to scientists from around the world. Because I want this country to be the greatest place for science, the greatest place to start a business and to invest, the greatest place to bring up your kids and send them to school, the greatest place to live.
The Minister also said the government will provide additional funding for scientists and researchers who had sought European Union resources. Now moving on to Kyrgyzstan, where the special forces have detained former President Almazbek Atambayev after a raid on his residence. This comes a day after an attempt to storm his compound left one officer dead and a police chief in critical condition. Former President Atambayev had ignored a police summons for questioning on corruption charges. His supporters say these are politically motivated. In June, Kyrgyzstan's parliament stripped Atambayev of immunity and his official status as a former president. Coming up next in the bulletin after a short break are Bulgarian artist paints on an unusual canvas. The world's largest collections of fossils unrivaled. August 9th marks the 74th anniversary of the United States dropping a second atomic bomb on Japan, this time at Nagasaki. The blast killed more than 74,000 people. In a ceremony commemorating the 74th anniversary of the Nagasaki bombing, the city's mayor Tomihisa Tayue read the peace declaration. He said knowledge of the horror of war is an important first step to peace. The ceremony was held at Nagasaki's Peace Park. Mayor Tayue said his heartfelt thoughts go out to the people who perished in the bombing. The current Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe wants to find ways to reduce the nuclear menace. Japan had to surrender by August 15, 1945, marking the end of Second World War. Now, Bulgarian artist Galia Stoyanova paints on an unusual canvas. She draws animals and characters from local folklore on delicate feathers. More in this report.
Feather art has gained popularity only recently. Many feather artists, including famed English artist Ian Davey, draw wildlife. Bulgarian artist Galia Stoyanova was searching for the images of birds and animals on the internet when she discovered Ian Davey's work and got inspired.
I did more searching and found other people doing this. I was interested to try it myself to see how it works.
Stoyanova is self-taught. She uses thin-tipped brushes and watercolor or acrylic paints to create her designs.
I just collect these feathers and decide which ones could be used or which ones needs repair. Those are from a turkey.
Initially, she gave the painted feathers away as gifts to her friends, but now her creations have gained wider attraction. Stoyanova says she gets satisfaction from fighting the challenges involved in creating her artworks and producing good results.
Now over to Kenya, where the Nairobi National Museum is home to one of the world's largest collection of fossils, unrivaled in Eastern Africa. Recently, the bone structure of a previously unknown prehistoric carnivore was rediscovered in the museum's storage. More in this report.
Deep in the storage of Nairobi's National Museum, this unassuming drawer contains an archaeological gem. The giant jawbone of Africa's largest ever predator, a prehistoric carnivore 3 times larger than a polar bear. At 23 million years old, this discovery made headlines the world over and is considered essential for developing understanding of the evolution of mammals.
It shows the wealth of Africa in terms of our past ecosystems and what used to be in Africa, and we can do reconstructions of the environment from these, the possible diets from these, and what other animals they would have interacted with.
But this important fossil was not unearthed this year. It had actually been in the museum for over 40 years before it was recognised as a new species. Museum staff knew the bones were something special They just didn't know exactly what, and lacked the resources to properly investigate. There are only 7 paleontologists in Kenya.
99% of those people who work here are foreigners, foreign people. So it's important for people in Kenya to understand the importance of this to the country and venture or study things to do with human origins and evolution.
The museum has not changed much since the 1960s. A card-based, handwritten filing system is still in place. Between 7,000 and 10,000 new fossils arrive in the museum's laboratory every year, and the task of cleaning and logging each specimen is painstaking. With a backlog that could yet take years to work through, the hope is that many more unidentified evolutionary treasures lie in wait.
Now, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences now wants to tell stories of people usually overlooked by the movies. One way of doing this is through its Academy Gold Summer program. This report has more.
One echo, take 2.
For decades, movies have told stories of people and projected their vision on a bigger screen for others to see.
Cut.
People all around the globe have seen a glance at life in New York. Who hasn't wondered about life on the other side of the tracks? Academy Gold is a summer program set up by the industry body to promote diversity. The scheme represents women, ethnic minorities, and people with disabilities.
Well, it's hard for everyone to crack in, and especially hard for minority people and people who have been underrepresented in the industry for many years. Things have changed, however, and I think that many of the avenues have opened up, and it's high time that that happened.
The project provides a platform for aspiring filmmakers to attend panels and workshops across Los Angeles. These are done in collaboration with the Tilson-town giants including Disney, Sony, and Paramount. The scheme stems from belief that Hollywood's white male-centered universe is no longer sustainable. However, there is still a long way to go.
It's getting there, you know what I'm saying? Not everybody's on board, you know what I'm saying? Not everybody wants change, but you know what I'm saying? There's going to be a point when they're going to be like, all right, if we can't beat them, we got to join them.
This year's Hollywood Diversity Report described modest gains by women and minorities in the film industry. Women held 32.9% of lead acting roles in movies, far short of their 50% share of overall population.
It's easy to also get discouraged by stuff like that, but, you know, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, we're on the up. This is like a good movement.
Young amateurs are making headway towards more inclusion in the industry. There is growing optimism, and audiences expect to see more stories they can relate to.
Now, American tech giant Apple has announced a $1 million reward to hackers who can detect flaws in iPhones and Macs. This is the highest ever bug bounty offered by a major tech company. The prize is only valid if the hacker gains remote access to the iPhone kernel with no action from the phone user. The giant says it will supply special iPhones to security researchers next year to help them find security flaws in iOS. Apple's previous highest bounty was $200,000 for the friendly reporting of bugs. Meanwhile, Asian stock markets are trading mixed despite an overnight resurgence on Wall Street. The Nikkei 225 is more than 0.5% higher after data showed Japan's economy grew for a third consecutive quarter. The Cabinet Office reported higher than expected GDP growth of 0.7% as consumption and investment offset slowing exports. Reacting to a fall in China's producer price index and soaring food inflation in July, the Shanghai Composite and Hong Kong's Hang Seng are fractionally lower. But the Kospi is more than 1% higher after global credit appraiser Fitch reaffirmed South Korea's AA- credit rating despite its slowing economy. Now at the Pan American Games in Peru, America's Daniel Carr has won gold in the men's 100-meter backstroke swimming final. Brazil's Guilherme claimed silver, while Trinidad and Tobago's Dylan Carter took bronze. Carr took the top spot in 53.5 seconds. Guaido missed out on gold with a slight margin of 0.04 seconds to get silver. Carter reached bronze after finishing 0.92 seconds behind Carr. Meanwhile, Brazil's Larissa Pimenta has clinched gold in the women's judo 52-kilogram category. Mexico's Luis Olvera claimed silver, while Vanessa Godinez of Cuba had to be content with bronze. South African batsman Hashim Amla has retired from all international cricket formats. The 36-year-old has played 124 tests, 181 ODIs and 44 T20 internationals since 2004. The Durban native enjoyed 15 years playing for the Proteas across 3 formats and established himself as a modern-day great. He is the first South African to score a triple century and the fastest cricketer to reach 5,000 runs. Amla finishes with a test average of 46.64. South African batsman Dale Steyn also announced his retirement from international cricket on Monday. Now let's have a look at the weather updates across the world. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.